Good morning, folks. It's a good little Saturday. Texas, Oklahoma today. Big day. So I'm going to run over a couple of these games real quick here and try and get you on some good plays today. Maybe take something down. The first game is South Carolina and Georgia. For wide receivers here. South Carolina is probably going to be playing from behind, so could play a couple of those guys. Brian Edwards, 6K is kind of expensive. He's cheaper on Fanduel, 7,600. I like him. My favorite wide receiver in this game is Demetrius Robertson for Georgia. He's 4,800 on DK and 6,900 on Fanduel. So I like those two guys. Muse for South Carolina can have a big game, as well as Markway. They're both cheap, so if you need the salary there, you can do that for sure. Running back wise, Swift is always in play. He's just way too cheap and can catch the ball and run the ball. Harrion as well. Really cheap. Both of those guys get the majority of the carries, 35 and 21, so pretty good there. For South Carolina, I don't really want to touch the running backs. Maybe Feaster as he gets some catches as well. The quarterbacks Fromm is probably in play there, as he may have a big day against that South Carolina secondary. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Let's see. There we go. Okay. All right. Second game is Mississippi State and Tennessee. A lot of running back or wide receiver value in this game from the Tennessee side. They are just way too cheap. I love how DK has it UT for Texas and Tennessee or 10 for Tennessee, because that's how it should be. All right, so Jawan Jennings gets 25% of the targets. He is 5,700 and makes big plays, 12 yards per target. 5,700, that's just crazy. Also, Marquez Callaway, same thing, 21% of the targets. For 4,900 and 7,400 on FD against a bad secondary. They give up 46 DK points to wide receivers, so I love that spot. Osiris Mitchell for Mississippi State, he's their main guy, 27% of the targets, about 9 yards per target as well. High total for them, 29, so could definitely see them putting up some points, and he'd probably be part of it as well. Running back wise, don't really love anything on the Tennessee side. On the Mississippi State side, Kylan Hill, he gets all the carries there, so can definitely see him going off. Let's see, yeah, he's 7,300 on DK, 9,500 on FD. The Tennessee running back situation is just too confusing. They have too many guys and never know which one's going to bust out in a particular week. But yeah, Kylan Hill's a good play this week. All right, let's for quarterback in that game, would probably look at Moore as he is the starter for Tennessee now, and Mississippi State defense is not good. So where is he? Tennessee. If Schrader gets the start and we get news that Stevens is out, I like him a lot as he can run the football and he's a good cheap option. He's only 6,500. And Moore is only 5,700 against a bad Mississippi State defense. That gets up 46 DK to wide receivers and 17 to quarterbacks. And 5,700 is way too cheap. All right, next game, big game of the day, Oklahoma, Texas, Red River Shootout rivalry, whatever they're calling it now. It's played at Cotton Bowl, so neutral site, half and half. Best receiver in this game is CeeDee Lamb, and he gets about 18% of the targets. Devin Duvernay, the Texas wide receiver, right there as well, gets 29% of the targets against a team that gives up 30 points per game to wide receivers. Definitely load up on Texas and Oklahoma wide receivers here. Jake Smith is too cheap, 5K, should get a good amount of work. Colin Johnson's going to be chalk, 5,200 if he's back. He's probable, so could see him get value pretty easy, as this Oklahoma secondary isn't great either. Let me zoom in here a little bit because someone's going to complain for sure. Yeah, nothing else I really love here. Hazelwood, freshman's really good, and Rambo is also good for making a stack for sure. The running backs, let's see. For Oklahoma, Sermon is the top option there, especially if Kennedy Brooks is out. Definitely lock him in. For Texas, it's Roshan Johnson and Keontae Ingram. Johnson is way too cheap. He got over 20 carries. Ingram got a stinger last week, so could see him have a reduced role this week, especially in passing downs, where they'll need someone to block. Those are the guys I'd look at here. Both are similar defenses against running backs. The two quarterbacks are in play here, Ellinger and Hurts. I like Hurts a lot. He should be able to throw all over this Texas defense, unfortunately. So, especially if they get behind, can definitely see this game going nuts. The next game is Michigan and Illinois. Illinois is terrible. They lost again last week. They deserve to lose every week. They're just, I hate them. Just fire your coach already. As we can see here, wide receiver defense from Illinois is just horrible. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts here. Ronnie Bell is too cheap, gets 22% of the targets, gets end zone targets as well. May not have any touchdowns yet, but they're coming. Donovan Peoples-Jones is due to score a long touchdown. Sainris still actually came in the game in crunch time last week. He's 3K, so if you need a 3K wide receiver, he's interesting. Was getting big pub preseason. Could see him get some points today, especially against Illinois. 40 points per game to wide receivers is just bad. Ricky Smalling for Illinois is interesting. Gets 30% of the targets. Doesn't make the big play, but definitely a possession wide receiver for 4,800. Don't hate it. Running backs for Michigan. Charbonnet is the dude. He's been getting tons of carries. He has had a knee issue, so True Wilson is back. He's 3,600. He's interesting as a value. Christian Turner's also there, getting 20% of the carries. True Wilson was in at the end of the Iowa game, so they do trust him there, and he should see a good amount of carries and a blowout win, hopefully. They're 24-point favorites. I'd stay away from the Illinois running backs. Corbin's interesting because he can break one at any time, but the total's 12.5, so don't want to mess with that. QBs, Patterson's interesting as a cheap punt play, as he's probably going to have a big game here. Not playing the running backs, any of the running backs from this game, just plug him in. Okay, next game is Maryland and Purdue. This total has fallen about 5 points since open, so tread lightly there. Wide receiver wise, for Maryland, UMD, Dante Demas. All the wide receivers are cheap here. Dante Demas dominates the targets. He gets 19%, about 10 yards a target. So definitely can get some long pass plays here, as Purdue gives up 52 points per game to wide receivers. Okonkwo is interesting. He's a tight end. Mabry also end zone guy, also a tight end. Darrell Jones, 3,700, gets 10% of the targets. DJ Turner's out because of his drunk driving incident. Yep, those are the guys for Maryland. Purdue, let's see. Rondell Moore's out, so we've got David Bell and Ahmad Anderson as the two big play guys. Bell gets 9 yards a target, and against a bad defensive team in Maryland. Plummer is terrible at quarterback, so could fall behind and see a good game script here. Running back wise, Purdue. So Xander Horvath is out. King Doru is the only one that's really taken carries. So for some reason, this game can stay close. You could see Doru have a big game here. He does get some targets as well, not crazy, but keep the pressure off Plummer. He could definitely make some noise for 5K. That's really cheap production there. Running backs for Maryland, I don't love. I know that Purdue has given up 31 points per game to running back, but that Maryland offensive line is horrid. So I'm going to try avoid that. There's some other 7K plays that I like better. QB, Pigram, aka Piggy, is a big play for Maryland. He's way too cheap, and totals almost 29 points. Like I said, it has come down, but Purdue gives up 23 points per game to quarterbacks, and he runs the hell out of the ball. He's not a great passer, but he could go bananas today. Plummer I hate, so even though Maryland gives up 28 points per game to wide receivers or quarterbacks, I don't love him. Aiden O'Connell was listed as an OR on the depth chart as well, so kind of one you want to avoid. Georgia Tech and Duke is our next game here. And pull up the wide receivers. Some good value in this game. It's Duke's homecoming week, so you scheduled the Patsies for homecoming. Looks like Noah Gray he had a bad game for his standards last week, as he maybe had a couple catches, but he does get a ton of targets. Calhoun was on the field for most of the game last week, and it's very interesting at 5,200. And that's pretty much it for Duke that I'd play. Georgia Tech gives up a ton of fantasy points, and Malachi Carter for Georgia Tech is the one receiver I'd want. So 48 points per game to wide receivers. He gets 27% of the targets. They're all short, but he is a big play guy. He can make one big play and pay off for you easily at $4,200. Running back in this game, tons of value. For Duke, let's see. Deion Jackson's going to be chalk. It's 5,400 on DK. He's way too cheap with Britton Brown out. He's probably going to get 40% of the targets. or carries. Mateo Durant is also good. Both of these guys will line up in the slot or in the backfield and run routes down the field. So I love that for sure. Jordan Mason's the Georgia Tech running back that's going to get most of the carries, 30%. It's just that Duke is pretty good on defense against running backs. Quarterback here, there is a couple of cheap plays that run the football. So Quentin Harris for Duke, 7,800. Georgia Tech can't really stop the run, and he loves to run the football. He's 7,800, so that's a good play. The quarterback for Georgia Tech now is James Graham. I always want to call him Lucas Graham and just go with a hybrid of the two. But he's a freshman. He does love to run the football, and could see a big game from him at 5,400. Him and Pigram need to be the highest owned cheap quarterbacks, I believe. All right, and next game, Bama at A&M. A&M is probably going to be behind, so they should be throwing the football. And Bama's cornerbacks haven't been great this year. Judy is an elite play this week, 7,600 on DK. 32% of the targets. Can pair him up with Tua and GPPs and, make bank. If for some reason Hurts and Lamb fail, I almost went with them as the core. It's really close. And Devontae Smith, also an elite play. Can probably just stuff those two in your lineups with Hurts and go from there. Ruggs got hurt 2 weeks ago, or last week, and he's been practicing all this week, but it's a hip issue. Never know, when that's gonna pop back up. Waddle is interesting this week, especially if Ruggs is limited. He's from Texas as well, playing in Texas, near his home. Could have a big day. Osmond and Courtney Davis are the two A&M wide receivers I'd look at here. Maybe Anis Smith, and total's kind of low still, 22. Playing a stack, I don't hate those two guys. And Bama and A&M running backs. Both of these teams have been pretty good against the run. A&M's running offensive line is trash, so you can throw out the A&M running backs, and they're too expensive. But like a Najee Harris or Brian Robinson Jr., I like Robinson Jr. a lot more just because he's cheaper and he gets about the same amount of carries as Harris. He's a much better value play here in a 40 total. I don't hate that. Robinson is interesting. Quarterbacks, definitely Tua. That's all I'd play there. All right, and next game is Washington State and Arizona State. This should be a good game, as these are pretty two closely matched teams. Brandon Ayuk, we always play him. 28% of the targets, 12 yards per target against a terrible Washington State defense. I don't know why I have Arizona or Michigan State there. Let's go ahead and change that. It's probably going to make a big difference here. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, so It looks like Ayuk is going to be one of the top plays of the week for sure. A lot, really bad defense in this game in the secondary. UCLA tore up Washington State's defense, and definitely see the same here. Washington State is just wide receiver roulette. Desmond Patman is too cheap, as well as Arconato. He gets a ton of targets. Frank Darby's always a GPP play. You can have one big play and take care of that 4,300. Running back wise, we have Borghi as well. Borghi and Eno Benjamin, two of the highest percentage of carries on the slate today, and good values as well. High totals, both in the 30s, and bad defenses. Arizona State has a better rush defense than Washington State, so could see Washington State having to throw. But both get targets as well, and are elite running back plays. I'm not going to hate on those at all. It just didn't fit my build, as I'm going mostly higher dollar wide receivers, and just trying to stay away from the more expensive running backs, because I like that build a little bit more. Quarterbacks in this game, let's see, Jaden Daniels is way too cheap, especially if not playing Eno. You can get him for 6,200 on DK, which is way too cheap for a 30 total, and against a team that gives up 35 DK points against quarterback. And then Anthony Gordon is 8,200, which I think there's other good plays in that range for 8,200. Even though Arizona State's secondary is horrible, I like some other plays there. Hurts is only a little bit more, and he gives you that rushing upside as well. All right, now Florida State and Clemson, wide receivers here. Let's see. Good Lord, my dogs are out of control this morning. I had a fire alarm that went off. It was a bad battery, and had to track it down, and they were going crazy at 5:30 this morning, so I didn't get much sleep. Okay, Clemson wide receivers, too cheap. Justin Ross and T. Higgins, they're near the top of my wide receiver metric here, and pretty good value, 5,900 and 6,300. Either one of those can have big games against a Florida State defense that gives up 47 points per game to wide receivers, which is crazy. That's way too high. Get 46% of the targets between those two guys. Hunter Lawrence is a little banged up, so we'll see what they go with. If not playing Etienne, I love playing Ross and Higgins together, especially in a stack. Florida State defense isn't good. For Florida State, I don't love any of their receivers other than maybe Terry, maybe Helton, but yeah, I'm kind of leaving them alone. They should be playing from behind, but I think Clemson dominates this game. All right, for running backs, Cam Akers is interesting, especially since he gets 11% of the targets. Just the total's 17, so 2 touchdowns. You could see him get both of them, possibly. And get 64% of the carries. He shows up really well in my metric just because of that. Team total should, sway people off of him. He could be an interesting GPP play as well, but that salary is crazy, a little too high. Etienne is probably my favorite running back play in the 7K range. It's a 43 total against Florida State, and they should be pissed after barely getting by UNC. So I love that. For quarterbacks, Hornibrook should be splitting with Blackman a little bit, but he should get the majority of the play time. So, but I'm gonna stay away from Lawrence just because his shoulder's banged up, and I doubt he runs that much today. He shouldn't have to. So I'm going to stay away from him. Next game is Michigan State and Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor is interesting here. Can he beat the matchup? He would be a good GPP play. Maybe he gets 4 touchdowns. You just never know with him. And he also gets receptions. It's just a rough matchup. But he exceeded expectations against Michigan, so he could do the same here. J.K. Dobbins did well against Michigan State as well, and we all think Jonathan Taylor is a better running back than Dobbins is. So he could definitely do that. Team total is 26, so 3 or 4 touchdowns maybe. Maybe he gets them all. It's just a slow-paced game with a lot of runs. Cone sucks. Jack Cone, he's not a good quarterback. So you could see Michigan State stack up against the run and make Cone beat them. Darrell Stewart's interesting. His metric isn't crazy high just because the team total is 15. Only 2 touchdowns in this game, but he does get 32% of the targets. I'm not touching anything else in this game. That's just it. Texas Tech and Baylor. I don't love this game, even though it is a Big 12 no defense game. I don't particularly love it. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Denzel Mims is interesting. He's 7,100 though, and there's other good wide receiver options in that range. Both of these teams have been bad against the pass. So let's see. Yep, no one I really like here. I love here at wide receiver. Oh, my dog is killing me today. She is gonna get locked up the rest of the day. There's no way around it. Okay, there we go. All right, so Tyquan Thornton's interesting, 5,800. As we see here, defense versus wide receiver is bad. Running backs, I don't really want to touch anybody other than Texas Tech's running back. So Roderick Thompson, as he gets targets as well as runs, he's been dominating the carries here lately. Quarterback, could see a Brewer or Duffy is interesting, as they both have rushing upside. And on to the next game. This is the late hammer of the day, Iowa State and West Virginia. There's some good value plays here, and I will probably have a couple of guys from these games. Let's see, Iowa State. Sam James is a little dinged for West Virginia. Could lead to some good value there at wide receiver. Got TJ Simmons there. He had a great game last time out. He gets 16% of the targets, and he's 5,100. Don't love that price, but there's not much else in that range. On the West Virginia or on the Iowa State side, Deshaunte Jones is still too cheap. I don't know what they're doing with his pricing. Gets 28% of the targets, 10 yards per target. It's just always a lottery with him and Tariq Milton. It's which one's going to go off this week. They're not playing rock paper scissors that we know of, so don't know what's going on there. But Deshaunte Jones is a good play. Tariq Milton probably be the pivot off of him. Honestly, one of those guys is going to go ham. today. Charlie Kohler, he's an end zone threat, 32 team total, and gets about 16% of the targets. And Iowa State isn't very good, or West Virginia isn't very good against tight ends. So I like that play. There's 3 or 4 good Iowa State wide receivers that are in that high to low 4K range. So with that late hammer, you can go into that late game feeling pretty good. Just trying to pick out the one that's going to go off. That's the difficult part. Running back wise, Iowa State looks like they've found their running back in Lang, as he went off last week. He was in crunch time as well. Johnny Lang is only 4,800 and he's up to 23% of the carries. He's a great value here. Crony is back, but I still, they showed good confidence in going to him when the game was in doubt. 4,800. Same thing with True Wilson. They had him in at the end of the game in crunch time. They trust him, and I love that. Kennedy McCoy is interesting here. Low points to running backs, but he does get targets as well, 12%, and gets 35% of the carries. It's just that West Virginia's running game is so terrible. Their offensive line is horrible. 4 quarterbacks, elite play, Brock Purdy. I love him. I think you can get him at low ownership as well. He's 8K, so he's kind of in the range of other good quarterbacks, and he has huge rushing upside. Can get you 100 rushing yards easy, and he scored in the 50 range on DK this year already. So against a bad defense, can definitely see him going off. But yep, that pretty much wraps up that slate. I'll be in the chat all day, so just let me know if you have any questions, and I will try to help you as best I can. All right. Good luck to you guys.